Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream. I really appreciate your joining us. This is sort of a special timed one for us over here because Chris, Tim, and I are in North America, and our special guest today is over in France. We'd like to welcome Gilles, the radio prepper. Very happy that Gilles been able to come on with us today. And Gilles is going to sort of walk us through what his channel is about and some of the nuances of the message that he's got to deliver. This is fascinating stuff, certainly is to me, as somebody who is an outdoor operator. Maybe what we'll do first, just before we get into the meat of this, is we'll kind of go around the table here, see what everybody's been up to lately. And just one note, if you're attending live, please leave a comment or question. As the moderator here, I'm going to pay attention to them, and I'll get to them as quickly as I can as we move through the entire thing. So, okay, just for myself, I have come back from Field Day. I was at a local flea market, Hamfest. Managed to sell off a few of my older pieces of gear, non-radio stuff. And I'm planning a camping trip. I'm going about, 7.5 hours north into the bush. Well, not specifically into the bush, but into a provincial park. So I'm starting to make plans. I'll be taking my SGC 2020 and stretching its legs up there. Chris, what's been happening in your neck of the woods lately?
Pretty much the same thing. But first, I'm thrilled to have Gilles with us, and I have to show a project that I built. I stole off of his channel. It's a low-power QRP dummy load that you had built years ago, and I said, "Hey, I think I can do that," and so I did. Great. But yeah, field day also for me. I did. My thing was I realized I was a few parks short of hitting 10 parks, which is I'm nothing in POTA, but I'm certainly not a heavy hitter. But anyway, I worked 3 parks on field day, which was pretty neat. I just set up in one and packed up and went to another, dodged some rain, and but it was fun. Field day was a lot of fun this year, actually. So did that, and yeah, I was just telling before we come on, I was telling Tracy before we come on, I'm planning a camping trip also in a couple of weeks. It'll be my first time in that tent since field day in 2020, so that'll be an experience. But it's also a POTA park, so we're going to bring the 817 with me and set up an antenna and see how we do. So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods.
Fantastic, thanks. And just a heads up for people who are watching who may not be aware, Chris's channel is Kilo 2, a YouTube channel, Kilo 2 Charlie Juliet Bravo Radio. So please go over, check out Chris's channel and subscribe. I didn't mention it right at the top, but if you're not familiar with myself, my YouTube channel is Outdoors on the Air. Okay, let's slide over to Tim, who is the proprietor of the eBay store, N9SAB antennas. Tim, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, just keeping busy. Got a bunch of new things coming out soon. Playing around with the linked end feds, as I was talking with Chris earlier, and dealing with the weather, which is hot and humid here in Chicago. Summers in Chicago are notoriously hot and humid. This one more so. But we'll get through it. We can't wait for fall. And I'm happy here too. I've been watching Joe for years. But Joe's one of those channels that got me into the whole radio thing.
That's humbling to hear.
Yeah, do you know what, Gilles? If I can add on to that, there is, in going back a number of years, there are a handful of people across the globe that I consider to be global ham radio ambassadors, and Gilles is one of them. He does an amazing job representing France. We had Peter VK3YE from Australia on. We've had Tim Golf 5 Tango Mike on from the UK. So Gilles, yeah, this is a tremendous pleasure having you on for this.
Thank you. Well, I started the channel in Florida. Actually, I used to live in Florida. I spent 22 years of my life over there, and I actually got my license. I think it was 2012, and in Florida. So I got extra over there, and so my call sign was is still Alpha Kilo 4 Yankee Hotel. I forgot to put the call here. And when I got back to France, they gave me a F4WBY, Foxtrot 4 Whiskey Bravo Yankee. So I didn't have to pass the exam in France, though. That was nice.
Oh, really? So they took your American license and just gave you one as a result?
They'll take it if it's extra level, yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you don't have to pass the exam here, which is a nightmare compared to the US. But like is most everything else, bureaucratically speaking, you guys have the upper hand. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Gilles, what's been going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, those last couple of months, I kind of hurt my back, so I haven't been doing much. But recently, I've taken my radio sailing, so that was kind of nice. Otherwise, it's always as much as I can. It's operating portable, in the field, and finding out what works and what doesn't, basically. And different ways of using radio for different ranges, like local communications, what I call near regional, far regional, and global. And of course, those are really different things. And so I do a lot of experimentation, basically.
Fantastic. Well, you know what? We're looking forward to the information you have to share with us today. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be responding to some comments that have been coming in. Gilles, do you want to proceed with some of the information that you've brought along now?
Sure. Well, I wanted to explain kind of what is radio prepping, because people might wonder. Generally, it is thought of being kind of like emergency communications, AMCOM. Or some people compare it to QRP, or like going on SOTA expeditions or anything like that. But it's really not. It's really not. It's really its own thing, so to speak. And I got into radio kind of at the same time I got into prepping, or a little bit later. I was doing CB like everyone else when I was like 14 years old, and I always had the radio in the back of my mind. I studied electronics when I was younger too, when I was in school. So it was kind of a natural thing to go back to, I would say, after 9/11. And I think that, it changed a lot of people's lives. And I was in the US at the time. And that's when I started wondering, what if, shouldn't we be prepared for anything, any catastrophe, any event that would be large scale, so to speak. And that's what prepping is all about. Prepping meaning, of course, being, preparing and being ready. So, of course, part of prepping is communications. And if you, the radio is the only way, basically, that could be used in case the infrastructure, so cell phones, internet, anything like that just disappeared. The only thing you have left is basically radio. So I got back into radio, got my license, and immediately I wanted to do Morse code. That was kind of the goal. It was to do Morse code. I was adamant about doing Morse code. So you're the guy that
Morse code.
Yeah. So I bought a kit. I bought a K1 kit, Elecraft K1, which I built, and it worked. The only problem was that when I finished the radio and it was working perfectly, I didn't know Morse code and I didn't have a license. So it kind of pushed me to do it, and that's how I started. And I started the channel shortly thereafter.
So you've got a forum, right? Isn't the radioprepper.com? Isn't that your? That's you, right?
The radiopreppers.com. Yes, that's me. The forum. It used to be very active, but it kind of isn't anymore. I guess that people have reverted to just watching the channel on YouTube, and Radio Prepper on YouTube, and also signing up on Facebook. There's a Radio Preppers group on Facebook as well. That's mine. And so kind of the forum kind of took a backseat to all that, but it's still on. And actually, I urge people to kind of revive it. Maybe that would be nice.
Yeah, I was just there. I joined.
Perfect.
Yeah, last week I think. It wasn't. It seems kind of slow, but hopefully you can turn that around.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's the more people go back to it, the more it's going to it could restart basically. But I'm going to keep it on. But basically, I concentrate mostly on the channel, and just making new videos and building antennas and things like that. I'm actually I started building a 13 element 70 centimeter Yagi recently.
Wow.
It's a two and a half meters long, so that's going to be something else. But I don't have a 70 centimeter USB radio yet, but we'll see about that later. Build it and it will come, right?
That's right. I had years ago. I had a 17 element 2 meter beam, and it was
Wow.
the gain was incredible, but it was so razor sharp. You know, when you're rotating that thing, I could hear a repeater like literally like it would come on and gone. It was that really,
Oh,
really,
yeah.
really, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
amazing.
just a few degrees, yeah.
I did the same thing. I had a Mosley 2 meter beam. It was one of my first antennas actually, and you could actually get across the lake with that thing without the repeater. It was wonderful.
Right. I built one. I found the drawings on M0UKD's website, and he has great antenna calculators. And he had that 2 meter Yagi that's basically the elements are held by clothespins, and so you can just you press on the clothespins and you can just take the elements off and you pack your Yagi in a matter of minutes. And that's really
cool.
good. So that was one way that I explored a little bit, regional kind of communications on 2 meters. And so basically, if I go back to the goal of radio prepping, or the differences between radio prepping and emergency communications, is that radio prepping really is about taking care of a group of friends or your family and yourself, and ensuring communications between members of your relatives and members of your group. It's not really, although it could be expanded, but it's not really about assisting in disaster relief. That's not the goal. Again, it's really nice to do, but it's more like for beyond that, because in disaster relief, you have a support, you have a logistics. People are here to help you. You might go in the field for a week or a month, and you're going to go back home. Your equipment can be transported. You might have generators. You might have, alternative power. You can have, basically you have a whole, generally a whole infrastructure behind it. But radio prepping is basically just yourself. So you have to rely on. You have to use low current radios, rely on solar power or, hand cranked systems or whatever, wind power. So you can't really use a lot of electricity. So small batteries, small radios, QRP, not QRP by choice, but kind of by necessity. Yeah.
And it seems to me though too, what you're talking about too, is that part of prepping, as people say, is just the acquisition of skills, and you acquire skills in radio and radio operation and setup and knowledge is just another skill that you acquire, and
Right.
It has to be a lot of fun, which is why we carry on with it. I mean, there are other skills that are not so much fun. I mean, I can stitch wounds and do things like that, but that's not something I'm gonna practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the radio thing, just to
definitely, and that's a mistake that a lot of preppers make, is that they'll buy a radio, like they'll buy a CB radio and a bunch of Baofungs, and then they try them out, and then they put them in a closet or in a box somewhere, hopefully in a Faraday cage. And they think that the day they'll need it, they're just going to pull everything out of the box and they're going to know how to use it. And of course, it couldn't be, further from the truth, because it's, as you all know, there is a learning curve, and there are a lot of things you need to know about propagation, and a lot of antennas, and I mean, it's just the list is endless. But you actually have to practice, like for everything else or prepping. If you have medical supplies, you need to know how to use them. You mentioned suturing a wound or something. Well, it's just, you can't just buy the stuff and, and try to suture someone if you haven't tried before, at least on an orange or something. But you have to practice. And defense, I'm not going to talk about that, but it's the same thing. Food preparation, food conservation, growing food. There is a lot of stuff that you need to learn, and radio is one of them. And it's not like the others. It's not something that you can just expect to work if you haven't tried it before.
Very true.
So, and that's the difference. And so basically, for radio prepping, we use QRP because it's convenient. It works. Yeah, you don't need a whole lot of power, and that's another fallacy that people have, is that. And I'm sorry for everyone who bought an $2,000 amplifier, but you don't need it. If you can't make contact with 5, 10, 20, 30 watts max, you have an antenna problem, because
absolutely
it doesn't take that much. So for prepping purposes, we're not going to carry a car battery or a heavy 50 amp hour battery. It's just out of the question, especially if you consider that you might end up on foot having to evacuate your region because, I don't know, something like Chernobyl or whatever, Bhopal, or industrial accident, or a natural catastrophe or conflict or anything like that. You have to evacuate on foot. You're not going to want to carry big batteries and a generator, and it's just out of the question. So that's why we use QRP. But it's not just to be QRP. Like, if I had a radio that was 100 watts and could fit in a size of a pack of cigarettes, I'd jump on it right away. If I could limit the current, of course. But
right here.
I have one of those. I have one. Mine is orange too, actually. Yeah.
Nice.
And actually, I'm probably gonna buy a second one because those things are so good. And I just bought a Retevis microphone for it, an amplified microphone. I'm gonna make a video about it.
I have been looking for that particular microphone. You talk about the HK007 or something like that?
Could be. I don't have it handy right. Hold on. Do I have it?
HK008 maybe?
It could be. It could be. It's a USB rechargeable microphone. The only thing you have to do, it's not made for the USDX specially, so you have to cut the wire and put a new plug on it.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm going to do that.
I saw. I think it was Manuel. I think I saw his video where he takes and does the thing and prints the little plug to go in there, and and it was that specific microphone. I wanted to keep it pure, so I'm looking for the HK008. It's not on Amazon here anyway, and the link on his site takes you to the German Amazon, which is like
Okay.
that's not.
I found mine on AliExpress. That's where I bought the USDX. I buy a lot of stuff on AliExpress, and I got it about 10 days later. So I think it was like about $30, something like that.
It's super cheap.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find it here in the U.S., so maybe I have to bite the bullet.
So basically, and I use CW, of course, for Morse code. I use voice modes. I use digital modes, handheld radios. Not just HF. Basically, depending on the range that I want to cover, and of course for inter-group communications, you're going to use handheld radios. I love military radios, but they're just too heavy, But for camp radios, they're excellent because they're pretty much indestructible, but they're very heavy. So handheld radios is Morse code. I really like Morse code because for me, it's kind of the essence of radio. Yeah. It's simple, it's elegant, it works. The radios are small, they sip currents. I had a Weber MTR radio that was using 15, and I'm not saying 50, 15 milliamps on receive.
Jeez.
Nice.
My K1, my aircraft K1 uses like 50 to 60 milliamps on receive. So with like 3 18650 cells, you can be on the air forever basically. And those are easy to recharge with a solar panel, and that's why you can be on the air for days with a set of batteries, and that's the difference between using that and an ICOM 7300.
Sure.
A great radio, but you're not going to run it on 3 18650 cells, that's for sure.
True that.
That's right.
And that's the goal. It's to have radios that you can. Well, first you have 3 different situations in prepping. Basically, you can be bugged in. So bugged in, meaning of course you're staying home. You're kind of weathering it. I can think especially of like hurricanes and weather problems where you could have you could be out of electricity, grid power for a couple of weeks maybe, possibly, or any kind of big storm. So you're bugged in basically. Any situation you could bug in, but there are situations where you would have to evacuate basically. So you could be mobile. So basically you're traveling with a vehicle. Could be a truck, could be a bicycle, a motorcycle, could be on foot. So you have to take all of that into consideration in deciding, what are you going to put in your bug out bag? And we all know what a bug out bag is, I suppose. What kind of radios you're going to put in a bug out bag that you're not going to want to throw on the side of the road about 2 miles later because you're tired. Something that's not too heavy and has the capabilities of communicating even globally if needed. Just if only to get the news from other places, other states, another continent even, just to get information basically that could tell you, where not to go, or should you go over there? Is there help you can reach somewhere else, or what is the extent of the emergency or anything like that, because you might not know. So you have to take all that into consideration and make yourself a little package that you can use for bugging out basically. So, and then you have a situation where you will set up camp. So you're going to be camped out somewhere maybe for an extended period of time. And that's a little bit different, because then if you were able to transport a little bit heavier, more capable gear with you, that might be the time to set it up somewhere else, but that might not be the case. So I basically have different levels of prepping. I have gear that is meant to stay home. I have another set of gear that is meant to be transported in a vehicle, and I have a third set of gear that is meant to be transported on foot. And of course, if it came to the worst situation, the gear that's too heavy would stay behind, basically would be abandoned, And that's a lot of stuff to think about, It's not a simple plan to make, but
You worry too much.
Actually, I don't worry anymore because I have all that stuff.
Good point.
Relax. The government will help you. Don't worry. The government's going to take care of you. You don't have to prep.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Conspiracy theorists prepping. It's not.
It's like the story of the old woman that gets pulled over by a police officer, and the police officer looks in her car and it sees she has a 44 Magnum revolver there. She has a Glock 9mm, and she has an AR-15, and he's like, "Well, ma'am, what are you so afraid of?" And she looks at him and she says, "Not a damn thing."
Perfect.
That's good.
Oh, that's great.
Somebody's asking about moisture.
Yeah, let me go back and show that comment, Gilles. What's your take on this?
That is certainly a concern, yeah.
So what I use, I do a lot of 3D printing, right? So I've also got I've got a large filament library, let's say. So we're talking, 20, 30, 40 rolls of filament that all has to be kept under certain conditions.
I have 8 rolls back right there.
See, you're lucky. You don't have that. That's a lot easier to manage. So what I did is I ended up going just on the web and finding bulk silica beads, silica gel, and then I just make my own little containers and place them in opportune spots for that. You could do the same thing for radio. You could buy the big pouches. You get them with you get them with beef jerky, right? Except these are big.
I thought about getting making actually cases. Actually kind of sleeves, like a phone case basically for radios, but using a TPU filament.
Sure.
But for moisture control, basically reminds me of one time I went to a survival class and I brought 2 radios. I brought my Weber MTR, so a little pocket size, a CW Morse code radio. And I brought my PRC 320, British military manpack. And of course, it was raining. It was the north of France. It was in February, I think, or January or February. So really bad weather. Everybody was wearing boots, and we were in camp. And my little tiny Weber MTR, with all the buttonholes in the case and everything. And I couldn't leave it anywhere because someone would have stepped on it, or tripped on the antenna cable and it was just, I just couldn't use it because the conditions were bad. The PRC 320, I didn't care because you could submerge that thing. You could use it as a something to sit on.
Sure.
And like I said, you could roll over, with your truck and use it to put under your tire so your truck doesn't roll back on a slope.
Yeah,
but
right.
it wouldn't do anything to it, Of course, it's really pretty damn heavy, but that day, it's the only radio I could use, What I do now, of course, when I use a radio, if I use it in a tent camping, usually I put it in a Pelican case, and those are expensive. Of course, you can find copies on from China, but I like to try not to use counterfeit goods as much as I can. I can't, sometimes I do, but the Pelican cases are really, really good for that. And I have a Pelican case for my USDX. I made a little, I think it's an 1120 or 1150, something like that. So about yay big, little Pelican case. And I have another one for my K1. And I have one for my antenna analyzer, actually. And I'm probably going to get more because I want to get a second USDX. Because that radio is awesome. It does absolutely everything. And so a Pelican case, for me, it's a really good option, but it really adds to the bulk of the bulk and weight of your system. So, but it certainly works, and you're not going to have any trouble with a waterproof case like that.
Still, though, ambient moisture, I think, is probably, especially now. I mean, it's got to be.
You can use a conformal. Conformal is a practice that's used a lot on drones, because I build drones also. And when you get your little boards, those boards are usually 35 by 35 millimeters, I think, if I remember well, or 30 by 30. I'm not sure. I think it's 30.5 by 30.5 or 20 by 20 millimeters. So very tiny boards, very dense in components. And you can buy a conformal, which is something that's like it's almost like nail polish, kind of. It has the same texture, and you apply it with a little brush, and you let it dry, and it absolutely waterproofs electronics.
Like a urethane.
Of course, you'd have to dismantle your radio to do that, and make sure you don't put conformal over things that you shouldn't put, you shouldn't put on. But definitely something that you might want to look into. But I damaged my Weber MTR by putting conformal on it, and unfortunately some of the conformal got into the switches.
Oh geez.
And basically, I was left with a one-band radio
Oh no! Jeez,
because the
pick any
switches
band you want,
was
as long as
stuck,
it's that
you know.
band.
And so there was you have to be careful, but conformal, and when you see drones that are being conformal, you know, you see people like landing them in the water, they go down a little bit and they come back up, you know, so it's absolutely waterproof at that point.
Gilles, earlier you mentioned Faraday cages. Do you have any information to share on those for your radio gear?
Sure. So what is a Faraday cage? A Faraday cage is basically a shield to protect your radio from an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. And there are two ways you can get an EMP, actually more than that, but the two main ways would be a nuclear explosion at high altitude, or it would be a solar storm like in 1958, I believe, the Carrington event. I think it was like... Right. It was like August 1858, I think. Yeah, 1858. And there was one also, Canada had some, I think in the 80s, there was one in Canada or 90s, or early 90s or late 80s, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was Canada one, I think, was in the 90s. And
right.
There's another one, too. I want to say that they're the Northeast blackout in like 2000, 2001. Somewhere around there.
Okay, so probably less important then. But if one happened again, like in 1858, that would wipe out absolutely all electronics that have basically a PN junction in them. So even flashlights, you know, watches,
Sure.
cell phones, radios, computers, anything would be wiped out. And so the only way to protect against... Well, it's not the only way, but the best way to protect against an EMP is to put your electronics into a metal box with no holes in it. And the radio has to be insulated from the inside of the box. So basically, you put your radio in a cardboard box, let's say, you put it in a metal box after that. So, and I use cookie tins because I can eat the cookies, you know. So of course, it's just an excuse.
Absolutely.
It's not good for my weight. But, basically, I bought cookie tins, full ones. I eat all the cookies in one sitting, and then I put my stuff in.
but you know what? So there's actually sense in that, because if you go and look for an empty metal container that's the size of a cookie tin, you'll probably pay more money than a cookie tin.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, if you had more stuff to protect, you could use like a metal trash can. Or metal ammo boxes, you know, and you just have to make sure that everything is bonded. You know, the lid is making electrical contact with the box, basically.
Well, I think you have to ground it too, don't you? I mean,
well, they are. Some people say yes, some people say absolutely not, because some of those currents are going to travel in the ground also. So I'm not quite sure. I don't personally think it has to be grounded. But I think that if you ground it, you better ground it from your base level in your house,
sure.
From as close to the ground as possible. So you don't have a wire that goes from the ground to your box, which acts as an antenna, basically. But I'm not sure that's... Even the experts are not always, you know, agreeing on that. So
well, that's interesting because we're heading into the solar maximum too.
Yes,
and we've had a couple of really good X-class flares and a far side CME not too long ago too.
Right.
And I'm not sure people understand just how powerful that can be. I mean, the Carrington event started fires through telephone or through the telephone wires.
It started fires. Yeah.
That was the first modern event where actually, you know, we had technology that could be damaged by that.
Oh, it could be absolutely horrendous, and we would be right back 200 years if that happened.
Yeah, and it's
instantly,
even worse.
It would be worse, wouldn't it? Because we are not as equipped as the people in the 1700s were, because we're so reliant on what's available today. And our houses aren't built to the same specification, and on and on and on.
And the population is much higher too, and we don't have the resources to feed. And I think there was a study that mentioned that 90% of the population would disappear.
Yeah.
If that happened, I wouldn't be surprised. The question is, do you want to be in the 90 or you want to be in the 10?
Yeah, good question.
And that's what prepping is about. It's, at least making some efforts to ensure that you might be in the 10%. But yeah, it's kind of you just basically try to increase your odds basically.
So they have bags too. You don't have to buy a cage.
They do have bags, yeah.
Bags. This one I got. I forget where I got it, but it's a MTG. It's called a silent pocket or something like that. So I got some goodies in here that I.
Yeah, Tim, share. What have you got in there?
There are also systems that are made to protect your house or your vehicle. Basically, they are electronic systems that will ground all your installation in like nanoseconds. And that's EMP Shield provides that. You can check out the link on my videos.
Actually, too.
But of course, it is, it's the best solution. Of course, is a Faraday cage.
They're Faraday.
Sorry, Tim. So what do you have in there?
Secrets.
That looks like a cookie tin.
Hey, your secret's safe with us.
Secrets.
If he tells us, he has to shoot us.
You could, but that one was kind of expensive. I think somewhere around here. Yeah, here we go. You can buy them on Amazon too. I mean, these are cheapies. They don't cost very much, but it's like a so foil pouches, right? If you know anything about plastic packaging, you get a lot of stuff in foil pouches, and what that is there's a layer of laminate plastic with aluminum foil with another layer of laminate plastic. So just like your cookie tin, and it's important that it's the cookie tin because it's lined, right? You don't have the food directly in contact with the aluminum, so you've got that insulating material. And these are just basically the same thing. These are just big foil pouches. So in theory, you could put electronic things in something like this. Ooh, it even says Faraday on it. Look at that. Can you see that? And these were, I was just playing around with these. These were a few bucks on Amazon. They're no big deal.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
So
you could almost put a laptop in there.
Yeah. Well, this one you can.
Right.
So I drop my little radio or whatever in there, and in theory, it's protected. But it's going to depend on the size of whatever event happens. I can't imagine that these little things are going to protect from like a, super duper event. So it's just one thing. That's all. I don't want my radios to or my electronic equipment or any equipment really to get fried, and leave you completely without capability. So.
And people don't think of all the stuff they need to protect, really. Like I was mentioning flashlights. Today, flashlights have, electronic components in them.
Yeah, they do.
And not only that, but for instance, wouldn't it be nice to have a pocket calculator, for instance?
Oh, yeah.
Simply, I mean, it's just, we're so used to having that on our phones and stuff that we don't think about it anymore. But a pocket calculator can be extremely, extremely useful. And a watch, just a watch. I mean, I have a watch that's mechanical, so I just have to shake it to recharge it. But
real preppers tell time by the sun, Joe.
Right.
Stars at night.
Yeah, but in case of nuclear conflict and fallout, you're not going to see the sun. It's all going to be ash.
Good point.
Survivor Man never had a calculator.
All right. I don't want to seem like it's all doom and gloom. It's not.
So, Jill, you mentioned earlier about like one of the I guess like the missions of radio prepping is to provide communications for others, like for family and stuff like that. So
Right.
how would you organize that sort of procedure? I guess like say that how would you get your family connected with you, and you could be the one that can provide the communication?
That's very difficult because, of course, people who are not interested in radio will not get their license. As you can try to bug them about it for 10 years, they're not going to do it.
Right.
So you're not going to force people to get an amateur radio license. And of course, if the SHTF, licenses wouldn't be as important as they are today in normal times. But if we consider that family and friends are close to us, and of course that's the problem, is when you have a family member that's, even my parents are like almost 1,000 kilometers from here, and they are at the exact opposite side of the country, and you could have family members in a different state, and that's a very difficult situation. First, I'll mention that for group communications, that's pretty easy, because presumably you have, your friends are in the same town or nearby. If you have family members, they're either living with you or close, and you could use VHF or UHF radios, like FRS radios, GMRS radios, MURS radios. All of that is license-free. I mean, except for the GMRS, but GMRS, you just buy the license, and it's a whole family license. And I'm speaking for the US here, of course, but you buy the license, you pay for it, and there's no exam or anything like that. So you could use that. And that's probably the best option. After that, of course, is MURS. And a third position, I would mention FRS. FRS has a very short range, except if you can get on a high point, which you could make a 50-mile contact with an FRS 500 milliwatt radio. That's not a problem. I once saw a friend of mine made a 100 milliwatt contact on VHF with a little 50 centimeter antenna, quarter wave, on a little Yaesu. He made a 200-mile contact. 100 milliwatts on VHF.
Wow. And
I've made contacts with PMR radios, which are the equivalent of FRS here. It's still the same radios, 500 milliwatts, non-removable antennas. And FRS stands for, of course, Family Radio Service. So those are the radios you can buy at Walmart, basically, in a blister pack. They work, but you have to know how to use them, because range could be 200 yards, like it could be 50 miles, and you absolutely don't know how that's going to happen. But if you use them from, let's say, the top of a mountain, and you have a good chance to make a contact somewhere. But you could use those radios for, let's say, local communications. Of course, there is also CB radio. CB radios are great. Of course, lots of people still have CBs. If they're they're probably not using them. They're in a closet somewhere, or in a basement. But lots of people still have CB radios, and those are excellent as well. It's the end of HF. It's almost VHF. 27 megahertz.
Jill's gonna get us in trouble here, talking about CB.
Oh, I don't care. I'm all for all kinds of radios. I love CB. I started with CB, and I think CB is awesome.
Gilles, on that note, so the thing I think about with CB is simply the overcrowding. So in terms of using a CB as an emergency communications tool in this context, you've got a limited number of channels unless you've got a free banded radio. Is that what you're suggesting? Is that a CB that's been wide banded is potentially a useful tool, or would you stick with one of the out of the box ones that have the designated 40 channels and
I think
sideband?
I think that even one that's out of the box is a good thing to have, and you of course you don't see, if you want to practice with it, you don't want to break the law. So of course, if you want to open it up or get a wide banded radio, get one, but just avoid using it in regular times. because you're going to get in trouble, and you could cause trouble to other users. So I wouldn't do that, especially if you don't know anything about antennas and harmonics or anything like that. And especially do not ever use a CB amplifier, because those are horrendous. They have no filtering. They can wipe out the whole spectrums of frequencies. It's awful. And so basically, you can use CB, even a regular CB, but for people who want to get a CB radio, get one that has SSB capabilities, so the USB and LSB modes. AM/FM is great, but it's just not enough. You're going to go much further using an SSB CB radio. So that's one option, and that's still for local and well, it could be for global communications. But the problem with CB is the high frequency, and 27 megahertz is not going to refract off the ionosphere. So basically, it's not going to skip very often. So you can make very long contacts. You can contact people on the other side of the globe with it. I'm sorry about the flat earthers, but you can make contact on the other side of the globe with it. But you're never going to be able to predict when that's going to happen, and it might not do it for months, and or even a whole year before you can make contact.
Well,
so
it's a lot like 10 meters, like
exactly.
Like right now, spots being the way they are, you could flip. I could flip on I got a CB sitting here with sideband, and I could put it on. And one time I worked a guy in England sitting here on a CB radio. I couldn't.
It bounced off the ice wall.
So CB is an option, but I would more consider it for local communications, and occasional, by chance, long distance, but especially for local communications. Now, if you want to go further, you're going to have to use HF bands and go lower in frequency. So I would say the king of the prepping bands is probably 40 meters.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that 40 meters will allow a propagation mode called NVIS, which is a near vertical incidence skywave, where you use a horizontal antenna that sends your signal straight up, and it rains down in a regional pattern. And you can also, if your antenna is a bit higher, or you use a vertical antenna, you can shoot the signal closer to the ground and then go even further. But that doesn't solve really the no license people problem.
Right.
The only thing that I've thought about is to maybe, if you want to give an HF radio to a relative or something like that, of course they're not going to use it, but would be to install a system that's a digital system. Something that's on 40 meters, maybe, GS8 mode. GS8 is a great prepping mode. It's a chat mode, basically. You can use it. You can use different stations as relays. You can leave a message in someone's inbox. It's an excellent prepping digital mode, and it's really, really good. It's based on FT8. The engine is the FT8 engine, but it's not FT8. It's basically made for conversation. And you can get the program. The program is called JS8 Call, and I think it's gs8call.com. And it's I would really suggest people to try it out, because that is the number one prepping digital mode, basically. I would say even before PSK31. PSK31 I would put in second position.
Our buddies here aren't really digital operators, but have you guys used JS8 Call or at all, Tracy?
No, I have not.
JS8, yeah, JS8.
It's okay. So operating digi is kind of like a different mindset, and I think for someone used to doing SSB or CW with the rapid contacts, the kind of thing, it's going to be excruciatingly painful because it's slow.
It's slow. Yeah.
It's slow. And you type and someone else is there. So it's like texting in like super slow-mo.
It's even slower than texting. Yes, definitely.
It's cool. It is cool, and you can, with a small signal, you can do all kinds of contacts all over the world. It's a lot.
Oh, you can, a couple of watts, you have global coverage.
It's a lot of fun if you go into it with the expectation that this is just a tool that we're going to use for this kind of thing. I mean, personally, I remember back years ago. Does anybody use PSK31 anymore? I mean, last time I was on PSK31 band, it was, I don't know about in Europe, but here it was like there's nobody there.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, somebody will activate a park or something with PSK31, but I haven't seen that.
Yeah. The great thing about JS8 is that you can leave your radio on and receive.
Yeah.
Because you have to leave it on. But if you leave it on, basically, you could be gone, the whole day, come back in the evening, and if someone sent you a message that day, it would be in your inbox. And that's pretty damn nice. I really like that. It's a really I think it's excellent. Really, it's really
Have you done any JS8 call videos? I didn't see any on your.
I've done JS8 call videos. Yes,
okay.
More than one. Yeah, a few of them.
And I forget, but they're all over. They're all over YouTube.
Yeah.
JS8 call.
And actually, Julian OH8 STN is a big fan of JS8 also, and it really if you haven't seen his channel, Survival Tech Nord, OH8 STN, excellent channel. Also, he's also into prepping and but more into digital operations and
I've heard of it.
Battery management. Yeah, he's a really good guy.
Tim, you're a huge fan of Julian's. What are you on about? Yeah, we all like Julian. We all like Julian.
Our Tech Prepper does JS8 call too.
Yeah. I like Tech Prepper as well. Yeah, I've seen his videos. Yep.
Yeah, Gaston's done some really interesting stuff.
All right, because this website does cost me much more than what it brings me, I did sign up for an affiliate program with EMP Shield. We are all concerned about EMPs, electromagnetic pulse, especially for radio equipment. And EMP Shield does provide protection for your whole home, for your vehicle, and for your radios. Yes, for your antennas. I was a bit skeptical, I have to admit, but after looking at all the documentation they have and the military testing they did, and those devices they offer are extremely fast to protect you against EMPs, but also, of course, lightning. So it does look pretty legit to me. I got you a coupon for $50 off at EMP Shield, so don't forget to use it. It's Radio Prepper in one word, all lowercase. By the way, do use the link down below rather than going to the site directly. That gives me more brownie points, and you do save $50 and I get a kickback. So don't hesitate to have a look at their website. I am learning more about it myself and all the products that they offer. And I'll tell you, the way the world is going right now, I think it's a good precaution. The solar cycle is coming back and there will be a lot of solar activity. So we could get a natural EMP, that's always a threat. And you want to protect your electronics. Your toaster, your washing machine, your oven, everything that has an electronic chip in it is at risk. And you need a device that's fast enough to ground everything in nanoseconds so that when the power comes back, you still have your electric and electronic devices. Once again, the coupon is Radio Prepper, one word, lowercase, and that will give you $50 off.
Gilles, just sliding away from digital for just a moment here, and sort of going back to the out of the box, setting somebody up with a radio that maybe isn't accustomed to radio. I find I've come across some material that talks about, people buying these Chinese radios that have scrambling capability, for example, or have the ability to be set up for, business band channels that aren't on the ham bands. What are your thoughts about that stuff?
Well, I think a good solution for that, if you really want privacy for local communications, is to get a DMR radio, which is digital. And some DMR radios have encryption capabilities. Now, you have to know that encryption in amateur radio is illegal. So you cannot encrypt a communication or hide the meaning of a communication in amateur radio. It's absolutely illegal. You're really going to get some attention if you do it. Like a knock on your door at 4 a.m. People in nice suits, But but it's a good capability to have, because of course you could program your radio with all the regular channels, and you could have like 1 or 2 channels that would be programmed with an encryption key. Of course, you're not going to use them, but just in case, let's say the country gets invaded, who knows? I don't know. Very unlikely in the US, that's for sure. But in Europe, you never know what's going to happen. But you could potentially use a encryption on channels that you would just have ready, but just going to use if you have to. Now on HF, it's a whole other story. If you want long distance communications using HF, so between 3 and 30 megahertz, the problem there is that it's really slow. You can't really use digital. Of course, you could use digital modes, although I don't know of any digital mode that has an encryption capability, because they would run into problems if that was offered. But using Morse code, for instance, you could use what's called a one-time pad. And a one-time pad is an encryption method that uses a list of random characters. Basically, when you code your message before sending it, and that's what the spies use, actually, still to this day. And I've heard, if you hear like 5-letter, 5-character being sent, then another 5, then another 5, that's a one-time pad. And
number stations?
Number stations, exactly. And those...
That's deliberately concealing communications.
Yes, absolutely. It's not amateur radio. But it's absolutely unbreakable, because the key is random. So the message is random. It's absolutely random. So there's absolutely no way of deciphering it if you use the key only one time. Mm-hmm. The only problem with that is that, of course, your correspondent must have a copy of the key. So how are you going to send him a copy of the key? Of course, the only secure way of doing that would be to meet him in person and give him a piece of paper with a key on it. You're not going to send that through the internet. It defeats the purpose. Also, you don't want to be stopped at a border crossing with a one-time pad in your pocket if they look at it, because you're going to have a long vacation.
Well, you might know one if you saw one. I'm not sure I would.
Well, I mean, I think that I don't know. I don't know if people really know about that stuff, but I think it probably would raise questions, and I wonder if
people use random pages in a book too. You could, you both have a copy.
But that's not random, because it's words, in a book. So that's not random. If it's truly random, the one-time pad must be generated in a random way. The way people do that is by using devices, not computers, but devices that use, like, let's say, wind gusts, radioactive decay, things like that. That is absolutely random and unpredictable. Wave action, anything that's not generated by a computer. And I remember seeing a photo of I think it was Bletchley. I don't remember the name of that place in England.
Bletchley Park, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And you had a bunch of women there with lotto machines, like they use the balls inside, and they would turn the handle and get the balls out and write and make a one-time pass like that,
Well, let's be honest, though. I mean, just for us, what kind of level?
Yeah, that's not. I don't think that would be extremely useful. I mean, but other things you can do also for local communications, you can have a grid with letters on one side, numbers on top,
Sure.
and you can put words in the cases.
Yeah.
So let's say if you take Charlie 7, you have the word I don't know, enemy in there, or vehicle, or so if you have enough words, and if you have 26 letters by 10 numbers, that's 260 words. That's a lot of conversation you can have, like observed vehicles at position, something. You could make, simply by coding like that, you could make a grid, grid with those letters and numbers and words in the middle, and you can use that for local communications. Of course, don't do that now, because that would be illegal. But it's a good thing to know how to do. It could really save a lot of trouble, basically.
Gilles, there's a comment from Tim. We mentioned him earlier. Golf 5 Tango Mike from the UK. He's got a great YouTube channel. Anybody who's watching this who hasn't checked him out, please do. What's your thinking on this?
SHCF is that heavy nuclear fallout might affect HF propagation. I don't.
Let's try it.
I don't think that fallout. Yeah, right. I don't think that fallout would affect propagation because of course the peculiarity of fallout is that it falls back to the ground.
Well, I think there might be some. That's his code. This code's coming.
And I don't think that radiation will impact. Well, I know actually it can create. I think it can create noise. But,
it would raise your background noise level.
Yeah, but other than creating noise, I don't think it would affect propagation. I'm not sure, but I don't believe so, because it's not going to affect the only thing that could affect actually the ionosphere, of course, would be high altitude explosions. In the ionosphere, that could hamper refraction. But other than that, I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, hey, Gilles, we are at the 1 hour mark, and earlier I positioned to you that this would be an hour long. We've still got 30 people watching the stream. Are you okay to continue for a little bit?
Sure. I was going to mention antennas because that's the most important aspect of your station. And of course the goal of my channel and radio prepping is to find antennas that are the easiest to deploy, the fastest to deploy, and that are really efficient because we don't use a whole lot of power. And I have to say that the best antenna I have found to do that is the unfed half-wave antenna. And I know some people are going to disagree, but now I'm going to start right away by saying that the unfed half-wave is not more efficient than a dipole. It is kind of a dipole. It's a half-wave. So instead of being fed in the middle, it's fed at the end. That's the only difference between an unfed half-wave and a dipole. Of course, if you feed a dipole in the middle, you have an impedance of about 73 ohms, I believe. So you can plug in your radio directly. That's close enough that you're not going to have any trouble. However, if you use a half-wave antenna, you feed it at the very end, and you can feed it anywhere along the way, of course, but if you feed it at the very end, because that's the most practical, you're going to have an extremely high impedance in the order of a few thousand ohms. And you need to reduce that, so you need an impedance transformer. And usually we use a 49-to-1 or a 64-to-1 impedance transformer. And you can make them very small. I have made them, they're just about that big, And using an FT 82-43. That's the smallest I've used. No, actually, I have an even smaller one by K2CJB something. I'm not.
You're talking about Adam's little NFED with a
K6ARK.
yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yes.
He makes that little FT5043.
Yeah, his is even smaller. I use 82 size as the minimum.
Mhm.
I like to use the FT140-43. And if you want to use like a high power, which I never do, it's I don't have any radio on HF that can go above 30 watts actually, and I have about 40 radios. But you can use an FT240-43. You can find the schematics online. You can find that I have explanations and how to build them on my channel. But
Great.
the advantage of the hand-fed half-wave
You
is
can
that it's small and you only need to attach it on one end. So you use a telescopic mast, some kind of a fishing pole or something like that. You just attach it to your fishing pole at the end, and you bring it up, and you're operating in a few minutes later. You don't have to attach it, at two different points, or making even an inverted V. You don't have to do that. You just basically raise it up. You can put it at an angle. You can even put it, of course, horizontally. 7-8 feet from the ground. Just on trees and stuff for NVIS, and that works really, really well, surprisingly. But the wire has to be a half wave. Now you really have to make the difference between the half wave hand-fed, or the hand-fed half wave, and the random hand-fed wire. It's not the same thing at all.
I've heard of that too.
The random wire is any wire that's not a half wave, and that will generate an impedance of a few hundred ohms, not a few thousand. So you need a 9-to-1 transformer for that. Now the problem, the advantage, of course, of the 9-to-1 with a random wire is that it can be a multi-band if you have a tuner. It's a great multi-band antenna, but you have to use a choke. You have to use an RF choke because there is a lot of RF current return. And well, that's about it, really. You have to use a choke, and you're going to have trouble with common mode currents.
There's a web page from the University of Delaware, and they took all of the different links for the random wire.
Well, I use that, yeah, right.
Yeah, this is the one I use too. So depending how long your random wire is, it'll give you the best spots. Because there are good spots and there are bad spots, right? So
I think it's I think 26, 29, maybe a 30.
Well, I use for the one
35.5.
I use the 35. There's two sections in the one that I make, which is a 35.5, which will take you out to 40 meters, and that's a real easy. It's like a 20-meter half-wave almost. It's just a little longer. That's a real easy deployment into a tree or into something like that, and that'll get you 40 meters. But you got to have a tuner. So I add a section, another 35.5 foot section, which will give you 80 meters, and that's actually easy to do in like an inverted L, which is how I use it.
All right, I'm going to show you one actually that I made a little bit of time ago. Luckily it's all there. I can grab it, and it's here.
Yeah, yours is in French though, isn't it?
I'm going to try not to twist my back. Actually, I have a couple of things that I can show you guys here, but well, it looks like I only have the box, but the box will be. Oh, not even. No, it's here. Okay. All right, so here it is, and
oh yeah, that's your twin your twin
right.
one. Right?
So I have a T. I think it's a what was it? A T106-2, I think, in there, and an FT140-43. So this is a 9-to-1. There's a 9-to-1 in there, and here is the choke.
Mm-hmm.
So the RF choke, and I have a plug here for to use a counterpoise, right? With an hand-fed half wave, you don't have to use a counterpoise because, and some people are going to disagree, I know, but it wouldn't be an unfed, right? If you use a counterpoise. You don't have to use a counterpoise if you use low power on an unfed half wave. Low power. But this one, I use a counterpoise because, of course, of the RF, the common mode current problems. But the choke really helps to prevent the radio from from messing up your radio, especially CW keyers that are very sensitive to RF currents. And you try to send Morse code, and it does, it goes crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Here's a battery pack that I use, for instance. That's my big battery pack. That's the biggest one I use. That's 4 Litokala cells. So they are live PO4 cells. Usually I use 18650 cells. So those are lithium, charged to 4.2 volts per cell. Those are live PO4. So then you charge them lower. I think it's 3.85 or something like that. There are 4 of them, and they're 7 amp hour. So very good.
There's a fellow on Twitter. His name is Dennis. I forget his call sign, but he has a little company called Denko, and he makes those. They're actually really cool. So I think if you go to like denko.com, you can see how he puts this together. That's actually very cool.
And of course, you have to use a battery management system with it.
Yeah, Floyd and Michael know what I'm talking about.
Right. And here's the microphone I was mentioning earlier. The one I'm going to use. That's the HK008.
Yep. You found it on
I just have to cut the plug and set it up for my USDX. So I'm gonna make a video of that actually.
Are you gonna print the connector? Like
I'm gonna show how I put the connector on. Yeah. And so that's for HF. That's the antenna I use, the unfed half wave. I don't use the random wires anymore. Not often. Sometimes with my military radios because they don't care about common mode currents or anything like that, or SWR for that matter. You don't have to care. You can even plug I plug an 8-meter wire directly into the radio, and that's it. I don't care about anything else. But the unfed half wave for me is the most practical. It doesn't mean it's the most performant, although it does give you a very low angle of radiation. So a vertical antenna will, especially a half wave, will have a low angle of radiation, so maybe 30 degrees, something like that. So dipoles are great, but dipoles, the problem is that once again in the field it takes more time to set up, and you might not have the time. And also, it's really they're never high enough if you want to make long distance communications because they're always somewhat too close to the ground, and you always have radiation that goes higher up, and your skipping distance is going to be reduced.
Well,
except for NVIS, of course. In that case, it's great.
I get this question all the time. I get 2 questions, right? The first is, NFED half waves are so great, whatever. And I try to explain to people that any antenna that you have is a compromise. Now, the NFED half wave is nice. Again, if you have it in a 20-meter half wave or something along those lines, I mean, you don't even have to get good with an arborist bag. You just throw that up in a tree and you're golden. Yeah. It's somewhat directional, though. I mean, you need to think about how you're going to deploy it. So, folks who just pull up to the park and throw it in the tree and think that they're going to work, the United States from coast to coast, it's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. And with a dipole, it takes a little bit of extra time to put up. But again, if you put some thought into it, you're going to get a little more bang for your watt than you do with the NFED half wave. But it's not as easy. And the other question that I get a lot of time is, do you make an antenna that I can use 100 watts FT8 with? And I told them no.
I think nobody should use 100 watts on FT8, but that's another story.
I don't. If somebody thinks that that's what they need to do, bless them. I don't care.
Right.
But they need to understand that when they're using 100% duty cycle modes like that, they should probably look for an antenna that's rated 250 watts or 500 watts or something like that. And you're going to be the guy on the band, right, that has this monumentally thick line going through his waterfall, and everybody's going to be like, but okay, do it if that's what you need to do. But to me, if you can't make that contact with 20 watts, 25 watts, 100 watts isn't going to make any difference.
Doesn't that defeat
I
the
think
purpose of?
You know what? Hey,
Well,
well,
remember that for radio prepping, the goal is not to fill up a logbook, so we don't care about that.
or be obnoxious like that too. I mean, I mean, if you're worried about if you're in a prepping situation and let's say being a gray man, putting out 100 watts on FT8 or JSA call is not a gray man strategy at all.
No.
And I've done Ascension Island, I've done Antarctica, I've done South Africa, Fiji and places like that with 10 watts, maybe 15, but it just, but okay, that's what. So those are the two big questions I get. Everybody wants an NFED, right?
Well, you really have to think about what your goal is. Like if you take, for instance, military antennas. One example being, for example, the pineapple. The pineapple looks like a pineapple. It looks like a heat sink, basically, with an antenna on top and a SO239 at the bottom. No, it's a BNC, actually. But anyway, that antenna, that big, what looks like, could be a heat sink or a transformer or something, it has a 50 ohm antenna resistor in it. a big 50 ohm resistor, the antenna on top of it, right? SWR is great. On all bands. It's a multi-band antenna. If you want a multi-band antenna like the military does, and you don't want the basic soldier to mess up with measuring SWR or anything like that, you put a 50 ohm resistor in there. You know what? It works well enough for them.
Sure.
And they don't care if they don't go, any further. They don't. It's fine, And actually, my military radios, the SWR means little. It's going to be more efficient if you have a good SWR. But like you take one of my PRC 351s, the antenna is a 1.5 meter antenna. Goes from 30 to 76 megahertz with a 1.5 meter antenna. There's no adjustment possible. Doesn't care.
I like Edwin's or it's like mine.
You take a radio like the RF10, you can transmit without an antenna, you can transmit with a short. It's not going to hurt the radio.
That's right.
Of course, the way they do that is that, for instance, the RF10, the final transistors are rated, I think, at like 16 watts, something like that. And it's a 1 watt radio. Same thing for the PRC 320 or PRC 351, or the output transistors are rated much higher. So even if you forget to plug in your antenna, you can transmit all day. It's not going to do anything.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's nice.
But of course, they have the money for that.
Yeah.
You have to, a radio that now you can buy for $500 back then was probably worth the equivalent of $50,000.
Yeah.
That's my money they have too.
That's right.
Money. It's been used already.
That's right.
But of course, now we can buy those radios for much cheaper because they're old. The only problem is reliability long term. You don't know how that's going to pan out, and once again, they're very, very heavy. Other than that, well, you can build a lot of different types of antennas. On VHF, I like the Delta Loop, which is great, especially on 50 megahertz. I built J-poles for VHF, quarter waves, for UHF, or directional antennas. I mean, UHF, you're not going to have an antenna problem. The problem is the size of the antenna, of course. And of course, the lower you go in frequency, the longer the antenna. But you can make very, very small antenna. I have an 80-meter antenna that fits in a small package like this,
Sure.
Very small, like it's just a small package, very thin wire. I think I got that on the wireman.com, I believe. Number 534 maybe, but that's from memory, so I'm not sure. But very thin, 26 gauge or something like that wire.
That's too thin. People are gonna.
No, that's not too thin. That's perfect. But it's still wire. Of course, you have to.
Yeah.
If you use a thinner wire, you're going to have a higher impedance, and you have a shorter bandwidth.
Sure, it's
so
a copper.
If you use an unfed half wave with a 26 gauge wire, you have to use a 64-to-1 transformer, not a 49-to-1, because the impedance is higher.
Right.
But I use that for QRP, and it's excellent. It works absolutely bonkers. And that's what you want. You want something that's small to pack and light to carry. For prepping anyway.
Sure.
After that, of course, if you want more bandwidth, the thicker the wire, the better. And for amateur radio, I would think that bandwidth is more important than weight.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a nice compromise in there somewhere. Now I use 22 gauge, which is thin enough to be nice and light, and not too thin to break.
Yeah.
I use tin to copper. I don't care for the copper clad steel.
I kind of like it just for the strength. Yeah, it works. I like it quite a bit because it's really solid. You can put quite a bit of weight on that, and it could have other uses. In prepping, you consider a dual use for everything you have, or multiple use of items, and having a thin metal cable. I don't know. You can make a snare out of it. You have to think of all that stuff.
Oh yeah, good point. Everything's got to have a dual purpose.
Oh boy, okay. Rabbits do.
Right. Absolutely.
Although
I think a lot of people would be hunting the same rabbits, So
yeah, that's true.
Around.
I wouldn't count on hunting for survival, that's for sure.
No, or fishing.
Canned food, that's what you need. Canned rabbits do.
Right.
Okay.
Although I have kind of noticed all the cats and dogs in the neighborhood, never know.
In some cities, you can go for the rats.
That's right.
Right. Pigeons, Yeah, I'm going to start feeding pigeons here, having them come to my terrace all the time.
Speaking of which, I have a fox in my neighborhood now.
Right.
Yes, I mean we're in the city, and it's there's a fox running around the neighborhood.
Wow.
Yes, we've got rabbits, we've got fox, we've got coyotes. There's a coyote family that lives in the ravine in the park across the street. It's wonderful, and I'm a late night guy, right? So I get up, I'm up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and if you're patient enough, I mean you'll see the coyotes running by. It's absolutely beautiful. But a fox,
as long as they're not foaming at the mouth, you're fine.
If I saw one during the day, it might be an issue, but at night they're running, and they're beautiful. They're not usually the coyotes that I've seen when I lived out west were, scrawny and, real, lanky. These look like, little German shepherds, fur and stuff like that. They're beautiful.
Yeah. You could probably eat coyotes. I'm not sure, but
I don't know. I couldn't do it. I
Tim's a dog lover.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Oh, me too. But
I couldn't.
I'm a food lover too.
Yeah, that's right. When you're hungry,
again, that's something somebody else. I mean, I'll eat somebody else's chicken soup too. I won't make my own. That's just too. Yeah. I'll let them use my radio. They can give me the.
Who, the chickens?
Yeah, the chickens. My chickens I are frozen. Thanks.
Well, if you guys have any question.
Well, before we wrap this up, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
How's the chat? There's some questions in the chat.
No, I think we're on top of the questions in the chat. Lots of comments that I've been flipping up on the screen. Lots of nice people chiming in, and thank you very much for that. If anybody in the chat does want to pose a question to Gilles, now would be the time to do it. Anything from either Chris or Tim at this point?
Well, I don't know. Gilles accepts cryptocurrency donations too. I noticed on his page. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just a
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
it's well, that's another side of prepping too, the finances.
I'm just a Bitcoin guy. I don't like to play with the other stuff, but
Yeah, well, it often it follows the same trend anyway.
very true, very true.
But some of the what we call the shit coins, excuse my
Yeah.
French, but some of them sometimes can just take off like a rocket. You just have to be ready. But they can crash like a rocket too. So
That's like a full-time job, though, keeping track of that stuff. But I was talking with I don't remember his name. This was a while ago. It was about a year ago. We were talking about QSL cards on the Ethereum network as NFTs, right? So the idea was, you have instead of mailing a card or doing something like that, you would just have your QSLs sent to you on the blockchain, and they'd be there forever. You wouldn't have to worry.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I've got shoe boxes full of QSL cards, and over time they're gonna degrade and stuff like that. And this would be forever. And that's an idea that I've been wanting to explore for a long time. I don't know if Ethereum is what I use, but there's cheaper other like a Solana NFT or something like that, or even you're in Europe, so maybe what used to be called Elrond was popular too.
Okay, yeah, I've never looked into NFTs. So it's not something I'm really interested in, but maybe I should check that out.
I'm not interested in NFTs either, but for a QSL card, it sounds like an interesting idea.
And that's another side of prepping is that it's not radio, but digital currencies, and I'm not talking about governmental digital currencies, CBDCs. That's another story. That's evil. But the decentralized digital currencies are a way to be independent from the regular monetary system, and exchange. You would be able to exchange currencies between people, but of course you would need the internet for that. So although there are systems that don't use the internet, but
you can do it via ham radio too. It's been done.
You could do it. Yeah, I heard about stuff like that. Yeah. And who knows? That's. Anyway, it's interesting. It's technical. It is something that's anything that can be used to further individual freedom. To me, is a blessing. And radio is one of them. Is one thing, because you are free from any infrastructure, and that's free from any government. Although of course we are government controlled, but we can be controlled, but we're still free. We're free to use our radio any way we want, whether it's legal or not, or whether in more in a prepping situation, it's whether there is a government anymore or not, and that's a different story. So story for another day.
Yeah. Gilles, I've got a couple of questions for you just to sort of wrap things out, up here. First one would be, now you said something, if I might have heard you incorrectly, you get something like 40 radios. Is that correct?
4 feet radios.
How many radios do you own?
The radios, about 40. Yeah.
Okay. So what's your favorite? What's your all-time favorite radio?
It's the Elecraft K1.
Okay. And just tell us briefly why you like it so much.
I like it because it's very sensitive. It's a very good quality radio. It's small, but it is purely analog, and the receiver is one of the best receivers you could possibly find. It's extremely sensitive. It has good filtering. The analog sound that comes out of this radio is absolutely awesome. You could listen to it with earphones for hours and not get tired of it, or it's not gonna kind of the other radios that are digital. I don't know why, but if I listen to them for too long, I kind of get edgy. It's kind of hurting my ears, and I don't. It's not the same sound basically. Although I can't tell the difference between a CD and a vinyl, but but the difference.
I was going to say there are audiophiles out there, and if you hop on any right,
Right.
40 meters around 7180 at certain times of the day, and you got these guys going back and forth, and well, my waveform is slightly, I can't, it doesn't bother, the radio doesn't bother me. I can either hear it or I can't.
Right. Well, of course, if you're talking about voice modes, SSB, USB, LSB, and even AM, I mean, there's nothing that's going to make any difference. It's not. I remember once I was using my KX3, I believe, or KX2, I don't remember, or K2, or anyway. I was talking to some guy, and I was using a $2. Actually, no, it was $2 for 2 microphones, including shipping that I got from China. They were little tiny computer microphones, and I plugged that in directly into my K2. And the guy said, "You have great audio. And what's your microphone?" I'm like, it's $2 mic from AliExpress.
Amazing.
And
I got a
then
question. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
Well, I was going to say, you don't need to invest, hundreds of dollars in a microphone for radio, because if you have a sound studio and you're recording musicians, yes, but on a radio, it's useless.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. So the Elecraft now, I mean, I've heard lots, and I've never used one, but I've heard lots that they're kind of fragile. You sort of have to baby them in the field. Has that been your experience?
That's why I had I had lots of Elecrafts. I had 3 K1s. I lost one. I sold one. I bought a third one. I'm never going to sell that one. It was a mistake to let the others go. I built a K2 that I sold like a dumbass. I had a KX3 that I sold, and I had a KX2 that I sold. And the reason that I sold the KX2, and partially the reason why I sold the KX3, was that because actually, yes, I was afraid to take them in the field, because they're pretty expensive radios, and it's not something that I want to risk. I was afraid to get those radios out, because if it started raining or I let them drop or anything like that, I was afraid I would damage them. And that's why I sold them. And the radios that I have today, they're not any less fragile, because everything that's commercial made is fragile anyway, except for some models. I'd say the FT118, FT117ND are pretty strong, but most radios that are commercially made are fragile radios, and I'm really concerned about that. Like, I don't like radios that have large screens. Actually, I don't like radios that have screens.
So, okay. Yeah.
Because that's just one more liability.
It's a weak
That's
yeah.
Right.
One more thing.
I would not.
Fail.
Right. For instance, even though I think the IC 705 is an excellent, is an absolutely awesome radio, I would not buy one, because first of all, you have to feed current to that big color screen.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a waste of electricity. And also, it's a big screen, and you let that thing fall on a rock. Here, in the mountains, it's all rocks everywhere. You let that fall; it falls on the screen. You're done.
Yep.
I like radios that either have a very small screen or don't have a screen at all. So just for that reason, and then after, especially the KX, the Elecraft radios, especially the KX3 and 2, they have a lot of buttons and they have a lot of holes in them, in the case. And I'm really concerned about that. So that is definitely something to consider. But the Elecraft radios they're really Morse code radios. They're CW radios, first of all. If you don't do Morse code, I don't see a reason why to really buy an Elecraft. Although, of course, you're getting a great radio, so maybe it's still a good reason. But the K1, for instance, is my favorite because of its size, the performance. 5 watts CW. It's the equivalent of 100-watt voice mode. So you have a lot of power. 5 watts, even 6 watts. You can have 2 or 4 bands. Mine is a 2-bander, but I have it on 30 and 80 meters. I would like to have a 4-bander, but it's they're getting hard to find now. People are not selling them, and they're very expensive. You can expect to pay $500 for a 4-bander, probably, maybe even more. because those are great radios, and I wish they still made them. But unfortunately, Aircraft doesn't make kits anymore, and they've moved on to newer, bigger things, more expensive, and really, it's not. To me, the Aircraft company of today is not the same as the one 10 years ago.
That's really interesting. That's an interesting point. Thanks for raising that. Okay, just to sort of wrap things up here, because there really aren't any other questions in the chat. Projects that you're working on or about to embark on that you'd like to share?
Well, I am going to try. I want to try 70 centimeters USB and CW for regional communications. So that's something I want to try out. I don't expect it to be really that useful, but sometimes you try new stuff and you discover things, and it teaches you things that are applicable to other areas of radio. So I'm going to give it a shot. Other than that, I really want to do some more field operations, because I've kind of slowed down a bit on that, and it's you really have to take your gear out in the field, and that's absolutely necessary. And not only radio gear, but camping gear, bug out gear, vehicle setup. And there's a lot of things that I want to test out away from civilization, basically away from grid power, and in situations where I would have to walk, cover a little bit of distance on foot maybe, and set up after that, and because it's as well prepared as you might think you are, the second you step out of the of the trailer, step out of your car, it's a whole different stories, and things that you believe would have worked really well are just don't work, and that's it. So yeah, until you try things out, you just don't know. And another thing I'm going to mention also is that sometimes you hear a lot of people saying, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. Or they tell you that the thing you're working on is doesn't make any sense, or it's and then you do it and it works really well. Sometimes it doesn't, but the most important thing I will tell people who want to experiment is to try things for yourselves. Don't believe everything you hear on the internet, and it's not always true. And people have a lot of things they believe also, and they absolutely believe to be absolutely true, and they're wrong. And and I've been wrong many times too, and I've been happy to discover that, because that's really the teacher is failure is your best teacher.
Yeah,
that's right.
Unless you go try things, you're not going to know what's going to work well and what isn't. Even trying to make contact, I remember. Actually, I made a contact. Julian asked me to try to make a contact on 80 meters with CW, see if I could convey information to someone. And actually, I set up my radio, and I found a German guy on 80 meters, and I asked him to send an email to my brother, giving him my position, latitude, longitude. And it worked. And it worked with a tiny QCX radio using Morse code. And sometimes people will tell you, oh, it's not going to work, or they'll tell you a QRP doesn't work. You need, 50 watts or 100 watts. You absolutely don't. That's the biggest fallacy, is the power fallacy. Is that you need a lot of power to make contact, and it's not true. Except if you're in a pileup, you want to break a pileup, you're in a contest or anything like that. Sure, but if you want to make a simple contact with someone, just a few watts and a good antenna, full-size resonant antenna with no tuner, is going to do it.
All about the antenna. That's right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gilles, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being with us here today, this evening. You know what? It's been an incredible period of time. Love that you've taken the time and imparted some of your knowledge and wisdom over to us.
I wish it wasn't so hot today.
Yeah, no. And for people who don't know, and I didn't, they don't have air conditioning in France. So it's, oh my gosh.
Sometimes we do, but not in my apartment, unfortunately.
Oh, geez. So thank you very much, Gilles. Greatly appreciated. Thank you to everybody who showed up on the stream. Thank you for everybody who added a comment to the stream. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. Do you have any closing shots?
Well, again, thank you, Gilles, for joining us. It was keep up the great work with your channel. Like I said, I'm a long-time subscriber. I love the content, so keep it up. And thanks. Actually, this is the only time we've had a guest on where I took notes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Hey, Tim?
Two things. Tracy won't say this, but I will. So like and subscribe to Gilles' channel.
Yes.
And like and subscribe to Tracy and Chris's channels as well.
Absolutely. The links to Gilles' channel are in the description below. So please make sure that you yeah. And I can't imagine. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I just can't imagine anybody watching this isn't already a subscriber to Gilles' channel. So, but for those of you who haven't, you've missed out. And Gilles got a significant number of really incredible videos that he's posted over the years. So thank you for bringing that up, Tim.
Wonderful how-tos. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. That's all for this time. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you down the log. 7-3, everybody.
Have a good one.